So it says here in Daniel chapter 8, verse 11, and he, the little horn, magnified. When it says magnified, what do you think about? Magnified. Pardon? To magnify is to make bigger. So a person magnifying himself, what you say that person is doing? A person who is exalting himself. Exalting. So when this little horn magnified himself even to the Prince of Hosts, it means that the little horn exalted himself as above the Prince of the Hosts. So he's coming against the Prince of the Hosts, and he exalted himself above the Prince of the Hosts, and it says, and by him. By who? By who? The same little horn. What? It says the daily was what? Taken away. So that little horn exalted himself to the Prince of the Hosts, Christ himself, and by the little horn, the daily was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. That is the sanctuary of the Prince of the Hosts. So notice that the Prince of the Hosts, that the little horn magnified himself against the Prince of the Hosts. He took away the daily, and he cast down the sanctuary of the Prince of the Hosts. You see that? So three things. The little horn came against the Prince of the Hosts. He magnified himself against the Prince of the Hosts. He took away the daily. The little horn took away the daily. And the little horn cast down the sanctuary. Verse 12. And host was given who? Him. Given who? Who is him there? The little horn. So the little horn has a host. But guess what? The prince also has a host. So you have here, notice, you have the little horn, his host, the prince, his host. The little horn's host then will be those who are following the little horn, and the prince's host then will be those in the prince's army. So you have two governments, you have two armies. You getting it? It is being set up in our minds. We understand it's very simple. So he says, and an host was given him against what? The daily. So the host was given who? The little horn against what? The daily. So the little horn is coming against the daily by a host. And it says, by reason of what? Whose transgression? It says, because of transgression. I want us to get this point. Because of transgression, a host was given to the little horn to come against the daily. If that transgression was not there, then the host would not have been given to the little horn to come against the daily. So the little horn could only have come against the daily because of transgression. He was only given the host to come against the daily because of transgression. Whose transgression? All right. So notice we go right back to the places where he was pushing. Verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which was exceeding great towards what? The south, towards the east, and towards what? The pleasant land. The pleasant land will be those that are represented by the people of God. And only those, okay, what is it that we were told in 1 John chapter 3 verse 4? 1 John 3 verse 4 says, sin is the transgression of the law. So you are considered a transgressor when you would have been given law and you go against the law. So who are the ones that was given the law of God? God's people. And who are the ones that were considered transgressors of that law? Same God's people. So because of God's people, in their transgression, in their abomination, because in Ezekiel chapter 8 we saw how they imbibed the abominations of the land. Now this is giving us a very important picture as to what happened in Israel, ancient Israel, and what is happening in modern Israel. And the only reason why the daily was taken away was because of the transgression of God's people. Very important. So, Verse 12 again. And an host was given him against the daily because or by reason of transgression, and it, what's the it there? The little horn. It, the little horn, cast the truth down to the ground. That's the career of the little horn. And it, the little horn, practice and prosper. So when it says it there, we saw that it means what? Rome. When did Rome begin to reign? Wants to see it. When will Rome end its reign? Second coming of Christ. So the it there represents Rome in 3 different stages, but it's all Rome. And it is a repetition of Rome's career. So pagan Rome did all of this. And papal Rome repeated all of that. And Protestant Rome, because the false Protestantism today is again Rome, you know. Rome will continue to reign. It will repeat the history of papal Rome. So the papal Rome repeated the history of pagan Rome, and false Protestantism, which is Protestant Rome, will repeat the history of papal Rome. That's why you have what is called what? You have the beast, and you have an image to the beast. A full repetition of the career of the papacy. But all is Rome. So, notice this. Little horn's career. Yea, he magnified himself, even to the prince of force, and by him the daily was taken away, and his place of his sanctuary cast down. The he here, in this verse, is still the little horn, representative of Rome. It is all Rome. The prince of the host is none other than Christ himself. Daniel chapter 10. Let us look at Daniel chapter 10, verse 21, so that we can see it there. Daniel 10, verse 21. It says, but I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth, and there is none that holdeth with me in these things, but what? Michael your prince. Prince. So Michael is the prince. Yes. Michael is the prince. So he's the prince of hosts. So he's the only one that's like God. Okay, thank you, Sister Anne. Okay, so the little horn thing, so we have that, notice there's and only those, listen to me very carefully, only those who understand the nature of the battle in this great controversy right now will be able to appreciate what is going on in Daniel chapter 8. Because we are in a battle, Sister Anne, a battle. We are in a war, and we have enlisted either a part of the prince's host, or we are a part of the little horn's host. Because there are 2 hosts. There is no neutral ground. There is no middle ground. You are either enlisted with Christ, or you are with the dragon. No neutral ground. The devil himself. Okay. So a question was asked concerning the sanctuary. Daniel chapter 8, verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning what? The daily. Don't put in sacrifice, because sacrifice is a supplied word. So this is daily. And notice this, and the transgression of what? Desolation. So you have 2 things there. You have the daily, and you have the transgression of desolation. Then he says, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be what? Trodden underfoot. So you have the sanctuary on the one hand, and the host on the other hand to be what? Trodden underfoot. Note again. You have the vision of the daily versus the transgression of desolation. Those are 2 things that are pitted against each other. In this great controversy, you have 2 great sides. 2 hosts, and these 2 hosts therefore will be having their representation. You have one host with the daily, which is called the continuum, and the next host with the transgression of desolation. And we're going to see who is the originator of the transgression of desolation. What's the other word for the transgression of desolation? It's called what? The abomination of desolation. To give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. So question is, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily, the transgression of desolation, the sanctuary and host to be trodden underfoot? It must be remembered that this is still speaking about the work of who? The little horn. The career of the little horn, or Rome in all its phases, is still under consideration. Remember that. So if we keep this in mind, we will not be tangled up with the pronouns there in verse 11 to 13. Not be tied up with it. It is all Rome. Rome in its career against the Prince of Hosts. So we need to understand the little horn's relation to the daily. What is the little horn's relation to the daily? What is the little horn's relation to the transgression of desolation? The little horn's relation to the sanctuary and the host that is to be trodden underfoot. In the New Testament, Jesus, now I want us to we are going into some interpretation here. So in the New Testament, Jesus was the first inspired man to refer to the transgression of desolation spoken of by Daniel. So we have to go to Jesus and find out what the transgression of desolation really is. What is the transgression of desolation? The transgression of desolation. Let Jesus answer. Matthew chapter 24 verse 15. Jesus himself going to answer it. The transgression of desolation, remember, is the same thing as the abomination of desolation. Matthew 24 verse 15. When ye therefore shall see the what? Abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel. So Jesus did not leave anything for us to guess. He took us right back to Daniel 8 because he knows that in Daniel 8, that is where you find the great battle. And you see Daniel 8 and Revelation 12? Those are the two center stage chapters that are equivalent one to another. Daniel chapter 8 is speaking about these three phases of the little horn doing its work, and Revelation 12 is speaking about the same three phases of the little horn doing its work. It's speaking about pagan Rome, papal Rome, and verse 17 it speaks about the dragon that was wroth with the woman. That is the same Protestant, false Protestantism, and the image of the beast situation. I'm going too quickly, Anne, you following me? Yeah, Anne, you following me?
Yeah, all the way.
All the way. Alright, so notice that Jesus here is giving the interpretation. Jesus. And Jesus said that when ye shall therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, what must spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place? Notice what he says? What is he here saying? When you shall see the abomination of desolation, when that abomination of desolation should stand in the holy place. Not that you should be standing in the holy place, that's not what he's saying. He's saying, when you see the abomination of desolation standing where it ought not to stand, when you see the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place, then you know for certain that something is about to happen. That's what you're seeing there. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place, and that is why you have the comments there. Spoken of by Daniel, take out that. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place. You get it? So take out that little phrase in there, and you will see exactly what the prophet is saying. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place, then you would have some understanding. Those who are reading. Follow? So we have to be watching. Now, this is what Christ was telling the disciples. They asked in Matthew 24, what is the sign of thy coming at the end of the world? And he took them through all sorts of things, and then he brought them down to verse 15. In verse 14 he says, now notice what he says in verse 14. This gospel of the kingdom shall be what? Preaching all the world. So you have something that's called the gospel of the kingdom. And then in verse 15, what does he speak about? The abomination of desolation. So you have the gospel of the kingdom and you have the abomination of desolation. Two things pitted against each other. So the abomination of desolation must be that which is coming against the gospel of the kingdom. So notice it, we're going step by step. So when you should see the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place. So this abomination of desolation is going to find itself in the holy place. But of course, you're still talking about the little horn. You see that? We are still talking about the little horn. And therefore Jesus referred to the little horn. So the little horn will therefore stand in what? The holy place. The abomination of desolation or the transgression of desolation is that which is associated with the little horn. Rome shall stand in the holy place. Claiming to be God. Magnifying himself above God. Wherever you find that there is one who is seeking to stand in the place where God alone shall stand, that is the abomination that will bring desolation. Whenever you find, and you know what is God's domain? Man's conscience. Wherever you find any man seeking to get into the conscience of man, to control the conscience of man, that is a manifestation of the abomination that will bring desolation. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, and this is Matthew. Watch it. Luke reverses this. Thank you, Salve. Listen to what Luke says. Luke 21 verse 20. This is speaking about the same thing, but now in more literal language. When ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with what? Armies, then know that the desolation is thereof is night. So notice that he referred to the holy place as Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the city of God, where the temple of God is, where the system of God's worship is established. And he says, when you shall see the place where God's system of worship is established, being surrounded by these armies here, he was speaking concerning the Roman armies. In Matthew 21, he says, I will send my armies. He was speaking concerning the Roman armies. This occurred in AD. The first time it occurred in AD 66. Who is the general? Cestius. So Cestius led the Roman armies in AD 66 against the Jews, besieged Jerusalem. That was what Christ was speaking about here. He says, when you shall see it compass, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. He did not say, know that the desolation is going to occur at that time, because he wanted to give them a warning. So the warning, God is merciful, Sister Anne. God is so loving. He gives us a sign and he gives us a little recess so that we will be able to really make ourselves ready. So when Cestius besieged the city in AD 66, and listen to this. When Cestius besieged the city, listen to it. When Cestius besieged the city, it was in the autumn of AD 66. It was during the time of the Feast of Tabernacles. But when Titus came back, 3.5 years later, it was, where would that take you? AD 70, and what would have been the festival then? What would have been the festival? Passover. Passover in AD 70. So, you got the tabernacles, and you got the Passover. 3.5 years. Okay. It was the armies of Rome that compassed Jerusalem and eventually destroyed it in AD 70. These things are very significant, and we're going to go into these a little deeper as time go on. And I just mentioned certain things, but we're going to get a little more information in time. So note that it was Rome. So when Christ referred in Matthew 24:15 to the abomination of desolation, who did he apply the abomination of desolation to? Well, that's the point. It's speaking about Rome, and therefore it must include pagan Rome, because the first application was to pagan Rome. Because where the Jews are concerned, it was in the era of the pagan Roman Empire. So if pagan Rome. These armies here are pagan Rome, and is referred to the abomination of desolation. How can pagan Rome be the abomination of desolation and be at the same time the daily? Because there are those who are saying that the daily represents pagan Rome and the abomination of desolation represents papal Rome, and it is the abomination of desolation which takes away the daily, pagan Rome. It cannot be. Not according to what Christ is saying here. Because in Matthew 24, verse 15, he's referring to the abomination of desolation as pagan Rome in this application. It will be papal Rome in the secondary application, and it will have another application coming on to the end. Because the abomination of desolation, again, will stand in the holy place. And I want you to notice this. The abomination of desolation could only have received a host against the daily because of transgression. What was the transgression? Who were the transgressors? The Jews who were given the covenant. And they forsook the covenant and they transgressed. Now again, notice it again. The daily or a host could only be given to the little horn during the Dark Ages against the host because of what? Transgression. Whose transgression? The Christians. Those who were given the covenants. No, the Jews evil way. That is in a pagan Rome. And a papal Rome now, it was the transgressors, the true people of God who were given the covenants. They forsake the holy covenant. And in our day, spiritual Jews. Spiritual Jews. So in our day, a host will be given against, listen carefully, in our day a host will be given against the daily because of what? Whose transgression? Modern Israel. Those who are given the oracles of God over and over again. Alright. So according to Christ, the abomination of desolation is directly associated with pagan Roman power. So the pagan Roman power cannot be the daily. Because Jesus says the pagan Roman power was the abomination of desolation in the days of the Jews. Is that clear? But the thought that the pagan Roman power is the daily is very rampant in Adventism. It was believed by a lot of pioneers too. But listen to me very carefully. I wasn't going to say that. But listen to me very carefully. Even if a pioneer believes it, it is not true, it is not true. A pioneer's belief does not make a doctrine true. It is the word of God. When Jesus said it, I believe Jesus. So notice what I said here now. According to Christ, the abomination of desolation, Sister Mary, the abomination of desolation is directly associated with the pagan Roman power. Now listen to what Sister White says. Great Controversy, page 26. This is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Let him which be in Judah flee to the mountains. This means that when the besieger comes, when Jerusalem is besieged, then they will still be given opportunity to escape. Notice what she says now. When the idolatrous standards of the Romans shall be set up in the holy ground. You get that? The idolatrous standards of the Romans. So there's something that is called the idolatrous standards of the Romans. So this abomination of desolation is directly associated with the pagan Roman Empire and is called the standards of Rome. Tell me something. Does God's kingdom have standards? Yes. So you have the standards of God's kingdom and you have the standards of the Roman kingdom. You have the doctrines of God's kingdom and you have the doctrines of the Roman kingdom. And you have the sign of authority of God's kingdom and you have the sign of authority of the dragon's kingdom, Roman kingdom. So when the idolatrous standards of the Romans shall be set up in the holy ground. So we are looking for, in the days of Rome, an idolatrous standard that was set up in the holy ground. In the days of the papacy, an idolatrous standard that was set up in the holy ground. And in our day, an idolatrous standard that will be set up in the holy ground. She goes on to say, which extends some furlongs outside the city walls. Then the followers of Christ were to find safety in flight. When the warning sign shall be seen, those who would escape must make no delay. So when the Jews saw the sign, they were to escape, and they saw the sign. When the Jewish Christians, the true Christians, and not one Christian perished in the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, because all of them saw the sign, accepted the sign, and when Cestius withdrew his troops, and the Jews ran after them and engaged in them in fighting, it made way for the true Christians to escape from Jerusalem. That's 3.5 years later. When Titus came back, then it was that desolation came to Jerusalem, but not one of God's true people perished. Evidently, according to this statement, the abomination of desolation is not exactly the Roman power, but the idolatrous standard of that power. So you have a power and the standards of the power. It is a belief system. So you can have a man and you have his beliefs. You see that? And we are told in Romans chapter 8 verse 7, we're told there, the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God that it can be. So the carnal mind or the carnal way of thinking can never be subjected to God's way of thinking, but the man with the carnal mind can receive the mind of Christ. Amen. So you can take away the carnal mind from the man and give him a new way of thinking, one way of thinking. And this transgression of desolation is a particular way of thinking, a belief system that magnifies itself above Christ. It makes itself God. That way of thinking originated where? In heaven. And was introduced to Eve and Adam in the Garden of Eden. That is the transgression of desolation, and it seeks to take the place of God's daily, continual work in our lives as the one only who can provide. What did Jesus say? Give us this day our daily bread. God is the one that must be giving us our sustenance on a daily basis. He is the continuum in our lives. Amen. So God is our daily. Rome is not the daily. Rome seeks to supplant the daily, and because he seeks to supplant the daily, that is called the transgression that brings desolation. So, evidently, according to this statement, the abomination of desolation is not exactly the Roman power, but the idolatrous standard of that power. So there's a difference between the beast and its mark. The beast is not its mark, but the mark is what? Inseparable from the beast.